consumers are much more multi-generational than they used to be. I said this before, but I buy a lot of the same things that my daughters do. So there's not this divide like it used to be. That we have a lot of the same tastes in common. And it's not like before I would never have worn something or bought the same brand that my mother did. But now, I steal from them and they steal from me, and it goes both ways.
Susan and Lily, thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it. And just to let everyone know, you are both with Grace Creative. And what I'd love to do just to get us started is I'd love to hear more about how you got started.
I'm the founder of Grace Creative, and I founded it about 11 years ago. My whole history has been on the creative teams of some very major ad agencies in Los Angeles. And then at a certain point, I left to just be with my children. And so I took time off as a mother. And then I went back freelance. And so one day I was driving to pick up my daughters from school, and it just occurred to me that, nobody was talking to my demographic, to women over 50. And, just in knowing my own network and other mothers, we were making all the buying decisions. We were doing, we were basically the CEOs of our families. And yet companies were not talking to this demographic. And when they did, it was so misrepresented, right? It was a really old school view of what 50 plus was, where it was all about wrinkles and incontinence, and it didn't look like anything like my life or the people that I knew. So at that point, this manifesto just kind of rolled out of my head about how, life was not black and white, and that we had lived through all these things, and that, we'd won awards, and we, built houses, and we built businesses, and we gave birth, and we did all these things. And what it all added up to was this incredible amount of experience. And from there, it was like, you might call it experience, but we call it grace. And so that's kind of how it was born, was really honoring the idea of the power of wisdom and maturity and what that brings to the table.
You had also shared, though, that, and we all know this working in advertising and marketing, that especially women age out very young in the advertising industry, not by choice, but are aged out. It's how you're perceived, and when you're perceived to be valuable, and what your contribution is perceived to be valuable, and at what point the agencies decide it's not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or even just not recognizing it. I mean, back then, you couldn't even really talk about having your children. It was like you didn't have a life outside of the agency, and you didn't talk about your children because it didn't sound like you were then as committed, as younger people. So that's changed a lot. But anyway, so in starting Grace, I also wanted to create a place that I wanted to work at.
Did you come up with the name right off the bat? With Grace? You did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the rebrand later. But the way you just described it, it makes so much sense. And I just love how Grace embodies everything with the wisdom and the strength that you wanted it to express.
Yeah. And I think, we can get to this later, but in terms of the evolution, I think that Grace is always associated with wisdom, and there's power in that. But what we also wanted to show was that Grace is strength, and Grace is resilience, and Grace is the ability, the ability to handle things, with grace. And that comes with experience, right? Where you understand that you understand how to pivot, right? As we said, we know how to turn pivots into pirouettes without getting upset about it. So those are all things that come through experience, and really, are hard to develop any other way.
I think our clients also feel that from us, and that's part of it. It's like we've been in their shoes. We understand what they're dealing with, and they have to constantly pivot. And they are under a lot of pressure. And
Hmm.
so, and the creative piece of the work is really important, but it's like a fraction of all the things that they're dealing with. So we also can help them think through what's important, how to get it done. We don't freak out. We're able to, okay, well, we got to change direction, but here's what we can do. Here's how, and so we really, I think that partnership is also part of that grace, the experience that comes with, having been there and getting it, and then being, exhibiting that grace and how we help them execute.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Well,
then I think the last part of that is that it really also means a sense of lightheartedness, right? And having fun, because it's
yeah.
like, well, sure, we want to do this, but if you're not having fun, it's not worth doing. I mean, it's not like we're having fun every single minute of the day, but we find a way to make it fun and happy.
Yeah. Well, you said you wanted to create a place where you would want to work, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
that is huge. Yeah. Lily, how did you come to learn about Grace Creative and to join, and what was that process and the thought process for you?
Yeah, it's actually a fun story. I was at Disney for a million years and left during the pandemic. I left at the end of 2020. I ran marketing and sales strategy for some of the newer experience businesses. So Aulani, which is Disney's resort in Hawaii, and Adventures by Disney, high-end guided travel for families. And we launched some sub products under that: river cruising, expedition cruising, and it was time. And I left a few things in between, and I decided to start my own consulting business. So I was doing fractional CMO work and consulting, and my first client was Seabourn. And so I was in house at Seabourn for about a year, um, helping do a number of different things. But one of those things was it was cruise industry coming out of the pandemic. So we had an opportunity to do a brand refresh and revitalization, which, they really needed, and the president really wanted, and the team was very much behind. And so part of that was bringing on a new agency. So I did an agency search, and we had probably too many agencies come into this pitch, to be honest. A lot of stakeholders trying to get everyone feeling like, they're the agencies they wanted to bring in were being considered as they were. Very in-depth process. And I actually was introduced to Grace Creative by a former boss, who I worked for a million years ago at Shy a Day. And then I thought, we should bring them in. They focus on the over 50, particularly women over 50. And, women over 50 make, depending on which source you look at, between 80 to 95% of purchase decisions, and, higher in the luxury travel space. We should bring them in. So they were a part of the pitch, and, they won hands down. We won hands down, but back then it was they won hands down.
Uh-huh.
And across, all stakeholders, from finance to, product to, so everyone loved the work. And actually, one thing to your point about the name, it just always stuck out. And I say this to Susan, now, the line of, like, nobody here is named Grace. It's what we bring to the table, and, all the things that she just talked about. So I guess we can't hire anyone named Grace, but really love that idea. And, they really got the consumer. They really got the market. They really understand how to speak to this audience in a way that nobody else did. And it made a difference. So that's how I first met Grace and Susan and the team. And then I left Seabourn, did some other things, and eventually reconnected with Susan. Just had a nice lunch, after. I'll share, I saw on social media that Susan's husband had passed away, and I didn't know he was sick. And so I reached out, we had lunch, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was great. I mean, we were kind of like, well, let's try it and see. And then what, 2 years later now, Lily is
Almost 3
president.
years.
Almost 3 years. She's president. She's made such a huge difference. And I just love that she brings both the agency and client side understanding
Hmm.
to the agency, which is really important. And, it has been very, I don't know, it's been interesting, educational in the sense of really understanding what grace means, both within internally and externally,
Yeah,
because I think that's really important.
it is. It is really important. And the knowledge that women in particular, older, 55 plus, are making so many of those decisions for a household and for themselves, but also for other people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. As you know, I mean,
Yeah.
statistics about all the people that they buy for and buy a lot more, right, of the same products
Right.
for Right. for their children and for their friends. I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
And parents. I mean, often you've got one point person buying for three people on a pretty regular basis. So that means understanding the other people's needs and preferences and making those decisions. And it could be anything from a grocery store item, a box of cereal, to big ticket items like you were talking about, luxury travel or, vehicles, different things. I mean, it really runs the gamut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you would ask this question earlier when we were talking, but just what were like reservations in sort of taking on this role and this area of business. And I also just wanted to say that when I've gone back and forth client agency side throughout my career, so I really didn't think I was ever going back to an agency. I just don't consider myself an agency person, even if I work in an agency the rest of my life. And I say it, Grace, I still probably will not think of myself as an agency person. And Susan always laughs at me when I say that, but because that's just not how I
work at an agency.
I work at an agency, but I still think like so which is helpful sometimes. But I'll say that I was a little hesitant on the 50 plus at first because it felt narrow to me, and it felt
Yeah.
like we're going to be missing out on other business. And
Spoken like a client.
yes, spoken like a client. And I'll say that so I have a group of women in a marketing and comms collective that I started during the pandemic. I was doing fractional CMO work, and was hiking with various people, all who were like senior executives in marketing or PR or comms at major corporations, and were leaving and starting their own things. And I felt like I was having the same conversation over and over. And I was like, we should bring everyone together. And it's really lonely, right? When you're doing it yourself and you're just kind of like you have clients, but you're the most senior marketer, and you miss having colleagues, right? Especially in person and all the things. So started this collective, and we meet monthly and we talk about different things. And I shared with them what I was doing. And I kind of just started rattling off some of the data points around the 50 plus market and just the buying power, and, the fact that, 50 plus is growing at 3x the rate of 18 to 49. And, like the great BCG study about the influence that this market has. And this is all women, and they're all senior marketers and comms people who have worked for major companies. And they were all like, what?
Right.
No idea.
Right.
And I think that was kind of the aha too, that people don't know and they don't understand this huge opportunity that's sitting right in front of them. And it needs to be and it's coming, and it's coming fast. And the marketers that don't get it and aren't there are going to be left behind, because they're chasing youth, which makes sense. But who's buying for Gen Z? It is their parents.
Right. Yeah. The money's still coming from Gen X to give to Gen Z. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, even beyond that, understanding that Gen X is buying the same things for themselves, that they're buying for Gen Z, and they're spending a lot more money on the same things because they have more money. But also to this point about understanding the market and it being a huge opportunity. I mean, I think what we do at Grace goes beyond the fact that we are in the demographic, not we're multi-generational, but obviously I'm in, a great percentage of us are in the demographic, and the people that we hire are in the demographic because they have that understanding. But it goes beyond that, in that we're hiring people who also understand how to create effective, successful campaigns, who have created them for, huge companies, and have created campaigns that have put companies on the map.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I think that's the essential, the internal and the external part of it is we understand the market, but we also are highly qualified to speak to this market beyond being in the demographic.
absolutely. Yeah. And it is pretty rare. I'm on the market research side of the
Yeah.
agency world.
Yeah.
And so ad agencies are culturally, lumping everyone together,
Yeah.
culturally a bit different. And I know that in general, agencies skew a lot younger.
Mm-hmm.
So, age 35 for a creative, you're getting to be one of the more senior people.
Right.
And that right there is a key reason, Lily, going back to what you were talking about, where just the basic statistics are such a surprise to so many people. When somebody described it to me once that I thought made so much sense. When you're 35, you understand what it was like to be 18 or 27, but you can't picture what it would be like to be 52 or 75. You just don't know. It's not part of your reality. It's very foreign.
And
And
a lot of times they feel like the same thing, that 52 and 75 are the same thing,
right.
until
Yes.
you get
Yes.
there.
Yeah. And then it's,
It's
yes,
like, no.
very, very different. That's what we talk about all the time. 50
Point.
plus is not a monolith. It's not a monolith.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
It's,
Sorry, you're
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, when we started thinking about founding Morning Light Strategy, Nicole Muncie, who's my business partner, um, she and I interviewed about 30 people we knew on the client side within Consumer Insights. And with the exception of two people, they all said, pretty much this is exactly what we need. We're talking about it, but here's where we get resistance. And resistance was coming from the brand directors, or maybe the agencies, the very close partnership with the ad agencies. And that's where
Hmm.
the pushback was coming. What do you want your brand to stand for? And that's where I think you all can make such a difference, because there is so much commonality of just basic human identities and desires that
Yeah.
are common across generations. We don't have to say, Gen Z has totally different emotions and responses to basic stimuli than Gen X or boomers. That's just not true.
To that point too, focusing on, the idea of focusing on 50 plus doesn't mean that we're ignoring the younger generations, or right. It doesn't mean that it's about who is the decision maker, who is doing the buying, and the creative and the execution includes everyone. And to your point, like, there's a way to think about everyone together holistically, but create through the lens of the 50 plus audience, because what's good for 50 plus is good for everyone. And that's been
Right.
proven out so many times.
Yes. Yeah.
So many ways. Sorry.
Well, and I think we're much more multi-generational. The consumers are much more multi-generational than they used to be. I said this before, but I buy a lot of the same things that my daughters do. So there's not this divide like it used to be. That we have a lot of the same tastes and in common. And it's not like before. I would never have worn something or bought the same brand that my mother did. But now, I steal from them and they steal from me, and it goes both ways. But I just think that we've come a long way since I started the agency 11 years ago, even in terms of what the 50 plus audience looks like now, and that fact that we're talking about menopause now on, on Instagram, and that so many of the influencers that even younger people, don't want to call them kids, that younger people look up to are older. And so that has changed a lot. And part of our mission really was to change what age looks like in advertising and media and culture, because there, a lot of it is still stuck in these old tropes, and where the, older people are the butt of the joke. You've seen a lot of ads like that.
Right.
So we really want to bring this new understanding of hey, this is not what this audience looks like anymore, and you really, should get on the bandwagon with this.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've been in the space a shorter period of time. We're just approaching 2 years of being in business, but I've been wondering, what it feels to me like people should have started recognizing this more so than they have. There's still a lot of people surprised by the basic math of population size and buying power and the number of people that one individual is buying for and things like that. So I am very glad to hear that you've seen it evolve in the right direction. We had talked about right from the start, you had identified this agency as you were thinking about what it would be. You had identified it as being Grace Creative.
Yeah.
And recently, just in the past few months, you have undergone a rebrand. Can you talk about how you decided it was time to do that and just how did you approach it?
Well, it was probably past time to do that, but you know how it goes. It's
Yeah.
sort of the cobbler's kids have no shoes. We were so busy working, but at the same time, we had evolved as we should, as we continually do. So we had gotten to, evolved to a place where we were more multi-generational for one thing, but also we just really wanted to evolve the idea and the power of grace. And as I said before, we really wanted to evolve the idea to really give it more dimension beyond, I think, typically you think of it as wisdom and elegance and refinement, and it can be that, but it's also strength and edge and humor and all of those things, which is a lot of what we bring to the table. And so that's what we wanted to do, and we also visually wanted to represent it in a way that felt like what the audience really was. So instead of a very traditional kind of approach, I think you can see from our website that we genuinely are having a lot of fun doing what we're doing and really love doing what we're doing. And as a team, it's multi-generational, and we really we were saying this at our Christmas party this year, was that we really feel like this whole idea has really gelled and the whole team has really gelled at this point. And I think that our website really represents that feeling, and it feels very human. That when you go to our website, you understand what it would be like to work with us, versus we wanted to stay away from, the giant font and all the graphics going and all the work, and really give people a sense of who we were as partners.
When I think about it, I think of a very clean look. It's very easy to follow and it feels very
Timeless, really.
timeless. Yeah. Very, it's inviting because it's not chaotic. It's not a chaotic. And it is fun. There is
We
humor.
wanted it to feel like Grace, just like all of the things that we
Yeah.
talked about earlier. We wanted the site to feel that way. And we don't have, every single person on our team featured on the site. And we just really wanted it to be about the feeling that you get working with us. Make it easy to find what you're looking for in terms of what you need to know about us. We didn't want to put everything we've ever done onto the site. We wanted to keep it really simple. And the point of a website, and this is something that we tell our clients too, it isn't to, it's really to get people interested and to get people to want more, depending on what you're selling. Of course, if the website is it, then that's a different story. But in a lot of cases, it's the entry point into another action. And so that's what we were doing there as well. And the logo is actually an interesting discussion that we had, because we have a new logo as well. And logo design is such an interesting thing. Like as a marketing strategist and not a designer, just hearing some of the discussions that Susan and team had, and we were all involved in that process. And the first pass of the logo design options, Sharon, our art director, our creative director, who was doing that work, shared some options, and a number of us didn't like the current logo. We thought it was too harsh. It didn't feel like grace. It didn't feel graceful. And the discussions kind of led us to grace is also about power and strength and showing power. And that is why she designed it the way that she did. And I know, Susan, if you want to add to that,
I
but
mean, it also, it has very sharp angles mixed with fluidity. So we wanted to combine that and kind of, again, evolve this idea of what grace means and give it more dimension. So it's funny you brought that up, Lily, because I forgot about that. In the beginning, most people were just like, oh no. And we felt pretty strongly about, what we'd come up with, what Sharon had come up with originally. And then we tweaked it some and we made it, we added some more fluidity. So this really was a team, effort. This was a team evolution. And it really represents edge and sharpness as well as refinement. And I think that really describes who we are and what our mission is and what the agency brings to the party. I think what's really nice about our culture is that our culture is very much front and center in our work. And what we found with kind of all rallying around this one concept is that we're all of one minded, sort of like it allows us to work faster, deeper, smarter, all of the things. So and that's another thing that we found with having a more experienced team is there's just so much shorthand for getting to the insights, figuring out you can just get to whatever that creative epiphany is sooner. And you don't have to go through all the trial and error as much. You can just get to it a lot faster. And I think that makes a huge difference. We did the photo shoot all in one day. And, and we had a great time doing it.
It looks like fun. I mean, from the photos, the results look like fun.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think it's just our ethos in a nutshell in a website.
And they're very real. They're not highly touched up, and that was really intentional too. And we use AI quite a bit and have some great tools, and our clients are asking for it in certain areas. But for us, we really felt like it was important to
authentic.
Be authentic.
Yeah. That is interesting. I know in past conversations, we've talked a little bit about the use of AI in advertising. And is that something that you see leaning more into, that you all are embracing more and more?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everybody is, right?
Yeah.
We have to. There are tools, and some of them are more advanced than others. And I think sometimes clients think that AI is more advanced than it is. And so that can sometimes be a challenge. Like, oh, you can just, you don't need to do this. You just use AI and create it. And it shows, right? When you do it that way. And in some cases, and with some proprietary tools and the right people using it, you can absolutely use AI to make things better, to change the backgrounds, to do certain, voiceover changes. It does add some efficiency. It doesn't always cut the time by, it doesn't always make it.
Sometimes it's more work. It's more work to make AI seem authentic.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And I mean, unless you really want it to be AI, like if you're doing something historical or that's the point. But when you're not trying to not have your AI showing, it takes a lot more work.
Yeah. When you want it to be raw, human, authentic, then the AI pulls you away from that a little bit. Is that what you're saying, or am I putting words in your mouth?
I mean, it can, but
Yeah.
I think you have to work a lot harder in finessing it
Yeah.
so that it doesn't. Like
Yeah.
you don't,
That
you
takes
don't
people.
want people to watch
Right.
something and go, oh, and feel like, oh, they used AI there and there and there. You don't want it to be showing. You want it to be seamless.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that takes more work.
So the best place for it at the moment, at least, is in refinement of the details and not in the, the most obvious pieces of execution.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, I mean, I think it'll never take the place of thinking or
Oh,
concept,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, it's a tool to execute that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Probably similar. Sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's probably similar to what you're seeing on the consumer insight side, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Using
I
AI for that, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. There's so many different uses of AI on the insights, the consumer insight side. So, um, I mean, I would say three main buckets in general. One is synthetic respondents, where there are, given what we already know about people, how would AI predict how certain people would respond? That's just kind of at a high level. But I think, and this is objectively, I attended a conference last November where there had been multiple studies that people had done to just see how consistently predictive those synthetic respondents would be, and using human respondents as a benchmark. And it was very hit or miss. Every now and then it might really nail it, but then on the next question, it would be very different. So there was, that's a problem too, when there's no way to predict, to say, okay, the AI responses are going to tend to use the top of the scale more. And so we can adjust for that. You can't adjust for it when it's not really a predictable variation.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So synthetic respondents are one AI to create surveys and to write questionnaires, or in qualitative to do the probing and really the AI moderation of an interview. And I think where we are now, to your point about it's not going to replace thinking, I think that's where the consumer insight still is. There is value in having if you have a quantitative survey, or you have a respondent experience where it's asynchronous and they're able to go in and complete the task, answer a few questions, whenever convenient for them, the AI agent in there can probe them, can pick up on keywords in their response and probe them. And there is value in that, but it's not going to be the same thing as having a human moderator who is really engaged in talking with a group of people live or one-on-one either. And then I'd say the third bit of it would be on actually finding the insights. And that's, I think there is a future in that for sure. It's on its way, but it's just not there yet, because it still does hallucinate. It still will pick up on certain things. And when you really dig into it, that just kind of falls apart. The data doesn't hold together to point you toward that particular insight or conclusion. So
Do you think it can take the place of intuition?
Oh, no, not intuition. No, no, I think that's a really good call out. Intuition, just that kind of gut feeling that is honed through different experiences, and having, being able to look at something and also making that connection with the business issue, and knowing your client as a human being, and knowing what they need and what's driving them and what their concerns are and what they, what do they really need out of this project. I can't do that. Yeah. It's interesting. Well, you had a campaign recently that was, it's still ongoing, but it's big. You did with Roar Forward. And I wonder if you would talk about that, because that is, I'd like to put the link up on the screen right now too. But will you talk a little bit about age is not just a number?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a lot of fun to do. But it really started during the pandemic when everything kind of shut down. So as a team, we were kind of like, okay, what do we do now? And it was like, we were, talked about it, and it was like, what really bothers me is all the people who say age is just a number. And because it just feels like, does it feel like, kind of a cop out way of not saying your age? And, we were hearing it all over the place. So we kind of came to this conclusion that age is not just a number. It's really the number of years, of that you've grown bolder and wiser, and all the different battles that you've won and all the struggles you've been through. And it all amounted to you being this incredible force. And that it was really important for people to say their age, because the problem, to our point earlier, that often when you're younger, 52 and 75 looks the same to you. Right. And
Yeah.
so if you don't say your age, if we keep hiding our age, culturally, we're not going to know what it really looks like. So I think part of that issue of an older demographic not being represented authentically is on us, because we never said what our age was. How are you supposed to know? Like, this is what 60 looks like, or this is what 70, or whatever, whatever age. So that's where that started during the pandemic. And so we just reached out to our network of women and said, hey, would you be willing to record yourself from home answering these prompts? You have to say your age to the camera. You have to say what you've lived through, what you've gained, what you've lost, and what you've started. And it was amazing. All these women responded. And this was, I think, maybe a month or two into the pandemic. So it's like, okay, nobody could get their hair done. Nobody could call in a stylist or anybody. They just film yourself. And everybody did it. And nobody cared. And so we put the first version together, and it was very popular. It did really well on social. But it was really just the start of that conversation. And then post-pandemic, we did some things with Roar, and spoke at their summit and with Michael Clinton.
Yeah.
And so we reached out to Michael and said, hey, what do you think about doing a version 2, a refresh of this, and include men for one thing, and really expand on this idea. And his mission is so similar to ours in terms of really showing age for the power that it is. And
Mhm.
he was totally on board, and so we partnered with him on the second round, and got some amazing people
Yeah.
to really get on board with sharing that message. And just everyone from age 50 to 90. I think Alan Patricoff was 90 at the time when he recorded it.
Yeah.
He's older now, but anyway, so we just launched that in November, and it's gotten really great response.
Good. It's so fun to watch. It really is. I've watched the video, using the link on your website. I've watched it a number of times. And it's exhilarating too to see people, what have you gained? What have you lost? What, just to hear people's own stories in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I've shown it to my kids and some of their friends, and their teenagers, and they were really interested, because I think that it doesn't, you don't, to the point Susan made earlier, when you're younger, you don't really think about all of these things that, life and experience give you, and what people have lived through and accomplished, and then to get to where they are, right? You just think they got the, you just don't think about it. And I think it was also really interesting and amazing that everyone was really vulnerable and real, and
Yeah.
shared things that were personal and hard, and wasn't just all perfect. And I had all these jobs, and then I became a really successful this, but then the whole industry changed, and now I'm figuring it out again. There's a lot in there around um you know gains and losses and wins and all the things, and I think everyone is also really confident and comfortable where they are. So I think it's great that this campaign isn't just isn't meant for just the 50 plus. It's meant for everyone. It's especially meant for the younger people to really help inspire them. And to so that when you do get older, it's something to celebrate. I mean, we're age and age is the only thing, or the only when you think about like diversity, everyone is getting older. If they're lucky. If they're lucky. Yeah. So, we want the younger generations to feel excited to age in and not out.
In closing, are there, what are you looking forward to? What's next for either you as individuals or Grace Creative? What's ahead?
You think sorry. Yeah, I mean, hopefully a lot. Oh, I just hit my head, so maybe that was for good luck. There is, to your point, Dana, around all the industries where women are doing the buying and making the decisions. People over 50 are doing the buying, and women particularly are making those decisions. Automotive, financial services, health and wellness, and driving, obviously travel, and also influencing younger generations at rates of up to 4 to 5x, and also doing more of the buying. Yeah. We are looking forward to working with some clients in different industries who really understand that, when you hire an agency, and you really want to think about the fact that you really want them to understand the audience. That's the most important piece of doing great work, and Absolutely. Not necessarily having worked in that specific industry in the past, although there's, some you can learn the industry, but what's most important is bringing in elements of other areas, other industries, other experiences to help tell a bigger, broader, and differentiated story. Because if you're in a silo and you're in a vacuum and you're telling the same stories in different ways, and who really understands the audience and understands that what's good for 50 plus is good for everyone. So you're not just talking to that audience, you're really thinking about it in a much bigger way. So we have some clients that we're hopefully going to be working with soon in some different industries, and we're excited about that. And we're looking forward to talking to anyone who is open to that and wants to work with the emerging market hiding in plain sight.
Well said. Well said. Susan, how about for you?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to bringing for brands to understand that the power of brand longevity.
Yeah.
That by really, I mean, as you know, there's a huge population shift happening right now.
Yeah.
With
Globally.
the longevity economy globally, and that, the first millennials will be turning 50, right? In 6 years. So I'm really looking forward to this shift in thinking and understanding, what the implications and the positive implications of the longevity economy can be for brand longevity. And, and just, I'm looking forward to brands just investing more in this audience because, we can talk about it all day long, but if you don't put money against it, you don't have the returns.
No, totally. Very, very true. We, within Morning Light Strategy, we talk about the 100-year life has broken the consumer playbook. And it is true. It is true. For the brands that used to think about people aging out once they hit 50, 50 is the beginning of a whole new set of needs. And, people are evolving constantly. They've got a lot of years left and a lot of years in which they are the primary decision makers. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, especially when you talk about, I love the idea of middle essence.
Yeah.
That you're hitting this other, your second adolescence or whatever you want to call it. But, we say it's like you're teenagers with money. So what could be better?
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Teenagers with money. And that idea of the 100-year life of middle essence and this ongoing constant reinvention of what it means to be over 50 really sets the stage for thinking of aging not just as a straight line, but really as a series of transformations. And that's exactly what we at Morning Light Strategy are focusing on. And it's what Grace Creative has captured with their Age is Not Just a Number campaign. So Susan and Lilly, thank you for this.